Hello, and welcome to this special episode of the Star Wars Universe podcast. It's special because we're talking about the last season of the Clone Wars. And once again, Paul and I have shown that we have some, but not entirely too much restraint because, frankly, these episodes are so good, we're not going to do them one at a time. We also want to get this done with, so we are once again doing two episodes, episode 9 and 10. Did I do math wrong?
No, that's correct.
Yeah, 9 and 10
I'm surprised as you are.
of the Clone Wars last season. So if you've only seen episode 9, please hit pause. Watch episode 10 whenever you're ready. This episode will be waiting for you. But Paul and I have an awful lot to talk about some very busy episodes of the Clone Wars. Right after this commercial break, we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm Matthew. I'm one of your hosts. Paul Hoppy is joining me, the other host for this Clone Wars last season update. Yeah, so do you think we can find something to talk about? I mean, there wasn't much that happened in these two episodes, right?
Yeah, it was pretty much just like they went somewhere, there was some fighting, and then they were still there at the end, so kind of no, yeah. I want to open with, like, I think the biggest compliment that I can give this show, and then these episodes in particular. Uh-huh. They made me want to watch the prequel trilogy.
I know, right?
Like, I have besides, like, since the first prequel movie, since The Phantom Menace came out, since I was in the theater sitting there thinking, what have they done? Along with, like, wow, that's an awesome lightsaber battle.
Right.
Since that point in time, when I realized that my dreams of really loving a prequel trilogy had been shattered, I have not wanted to watch the prequel trilogy this much, or really almost at all. But it just really makes me want to be like, oh yeah, so what did happen? How does it, like, and like maybe like watch some and then pause it and then watch the parts of these episodes and then pause it and then go back and then back, because plot wise, kind of works out that way. Yeah.
Like, I mean, okay, just a couple of moments there. Like, you're right. I had the same moment after I finished all the rest of the Clone Wars when I first watched it through.
Yeah.
And I did rewatch the prequels, and Jar Jar is still terrible, and Sand is still coarse. But a lot of it makes so much more sense because I felt like the dots between Anakin of Episode 2 and Anakin of Episode 3 had been connected so much better.
Right.
And now I want to go watch Obi-Wan and Anakin talking in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Now that I've seen the heartbreak on Obi-Wan's face as he's talking to Ahsoka, knowing that he's losing Anakin. Like, he never says those words, but that scene was so powerful because I was like, I know, it was so good.
Yeah. That scene being Obi-Wan talking to Ahsoka about basically the council assigning Anakin to spy on the Chancellor, which, I mean, that never really made any sense, right?
Yeah.
But I guess they were super blinded to...
Right. Well, they're super blinded, and I think it's Obi-Wan really starting to realize not only that the Chancellor has some real problems, but how far Anakin has fallen. Like, to me, it also made me want to see, again, the moment where Obi-Wan admits to... Luke, how much he failed Anakin, because that's what I'm starting to see in that scene, especially when Ahsoka doesn't want to accept it. She's like, no, Anakin couldn't do that. And Obi-Wan doesn't even argue with her. He's just sad.
Yeah.
It was just so powerful on so many levels. I part of me wants to just kind of like fan blurt about like how good everything was, but I'm sure we could go in some kind of order.
Yeah.
But let me just talk about the other, I think, truly amazing thing. I think in the end of the second episode, the lightsaber battle between Ahsoka and Darth Maul is hands down the best fight scene I've ever seen in animation. And it's a close fight because I'm currently rewatching Avatar, which has some really good ones.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I think, though, it's also in my top 5 lightsaber fights. Like... It was really, really well done.
It really was. Also, I think the fact that this is, like, episode 10, right? I mean, we watched 9, and there's a Jedi, and there's a former Sith. I guess a former Jedi and a former Sith. and like they don't quite, get their lightsabers out yet, but like it's the 10th episode of the final season, and we finally get our first lightsaber battle. And they've even barely used lightsabers at all throughout. Like Anakin a little bit, but like really not very much, and Ahsoka basically not at all, right? I guess in episode 9 she used it a little, but and it's sort of like there it is, It's like
you knew what you were doing. You were building the tension for this moment, and then you gave us this phenomenal scene. Yeah,
it did not disappoint. And I mean that's a great lightsaber battle, and it's really set up well, and it's it's just between such an interesting pairing of characters, like the former apprentice of Sidious, who was basically just like left to die or left, forgotten, and then the former apprentice of Anakin, who left on her own, not really because of Anakin, but and then this revelation that Anakin and Sidious are connected, even if Anakin doesn't really know it at the moment. But nobody else knows it for sure.
Right. Let's get to that. I think let's kind of, instead of doing it by character, let's kind of just go chronologically through these 2 episodes, because there's so much that happens. So we start off with what seems like kind of a fairly generic, just battle scene on a generic planet, and it's a little bit of. I think part of what we're seeing here is that Anakin is just to the point where he just has absolutely no more fucks to give.
Yeah.
In a way that I thought was kind of cool. But I admit, a part of me was a little like, wait, really?
Wait, Anakin or?
Anakin, definitely. The way he's just...
Oh, that scene. Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah, where Anakin basically just walks up and pretends to surrender and all of that.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan is just like, what the hell? I mean, it almost has that kind of like thrill-seeking, like, I don't fear danger anymore because I'm just over the edge.
Yeah.
But a part of me was watching that going like, wait, why are we having this? What about the Mandalorians? What about Ahsoka?
Yeah.
And so when they did tie it in, I was like, okay, cool. This is a great way to do it.
Right.
So we get all that, and then Ahsoka comes back. So what's and we get Ahsoka kind of coming back and having this really kind of, I thought, interesting reaction and resolution, but reuniting with Anakin, where Anakin is now completely off the emotional deep end. Like he's, there's no restraint. He's very happy to see her, and she's very cold.
Yeah.
But then they get that wonderful scene of him giving her back her lightsabers, and the troops all painting their helmets to look like hers.
Yeah.
What's your take on kind of all what we get and all that?
I feel like she's kind of trying to not let her emotions kind of like, she doesn't want to come back to the Jedi.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think she kind of tries not to kind of indulge that attachment, that she obviously, has.
Yeah.
Right? And
it's that like
particularly
you're having
Anakin.
you're having dinner with your ex and you're trying really hard not to just go like, oh, I miss this person.
Right. And like, let's just be civil and let's do what we need to do, the paperwork, whatever,
Yeah.
And then the clones, I think, are more like she can't. I think she can't kind of like fake it as much, sort of like with the clones, because like it feels more. I don't know. It just feels different, because they're different than Anakin, and it feels so like it's. I don't know exactly how I want to say it. Like, it's not that it doesn't feel sincere coming from Anakin, right? Mm-hmm. But like, it's sort of like for him, it seems like it's a little bit. It's like, oh well, that's my student, and friend.
Right.
But with them, it's like there's this, like just it's very touching, that it's like she kind of meant that much to them,
Right.
And
I think there's like 2 different power things going on here. On the one hand, Anakin was her master, was her trainer, and so I think on some level she might have some feeling of resentment and like, why didn't you fight harder for me? Why didn't you leave when I leave? Like, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Whereas I think she looks at Rex and Cody and the clones as like, they're just as stuck as I was, and they're more like, they had nothing to do with what happened to me, but they're the people I left behind.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a real difference there.
Mm-hmm.
I did like that. I know we'd both been, especially you've been wondering about like why was she not using the lightsabers that whole time? We both have been wondering about that.
Yeah, I guess they weren't in her bag.
Yeah, and I kind of that scene made me tear up, honestly. Like when he gave her those back, that was such a nice moment of like, oh, okay, we're not bringing her back into the Jedi, but we're recognizing what she is and what she could be.
Yeah.
And yeah, that scene of all of them having painted the helmets, I just thought was so incredibly powerful.
And then I like that she says like good luck. I think that's what she said, right? As opposed to like may the force be with you. It's like she's like, no, I'm gonna say good luck now. Like,
oh, I hadn't even caught that. Yeah,
didn't she? And
I think she does. Yeah, and I think they say something about how like Obi-Wan wouldn't approve.
Yeah, he's like he doesn't believe there's anything as good as luck or whatever, and she's like, yeah, well, good luck. Like Yeah. Doesn't work out super well for Anakin, but I mean, it's a nice thought.
Well, and it's another one of those moments that made me want to go back and watch the prequels again because that moment where, we'd sort of been wondering of if that moment where Anakin knows that she's on the freighter was kind of a moment of the last meeting for them. But I think we're very clear now that the goodbye they have here is their last goodbye.
Yes.
And that was just really affecting because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I imagine we're not going to have Anakin on screen more. I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll see. But it seems like this is going to be the fallout of what is going on in the main, in the movie. But yeah, like with the clones and with Anakin, I feel like her response to coming back, like she sort of feels a sense of responsibility towards the clones, and as opposed to like she feels like Anakin had a responsibility towards her, I think, and it's sort of like maybe a little bit like coming back and seeing like a kid you left behind as opposed to like a parent whose home you left.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly the kind of metaphor I was thinking of. You got free and that's good, but here's the one who's still stuck there.
Right. And then that leads into like now it's like, well, what are they doing? Like, yeah, they're going off after Darth Maul, right? Because some Mandalorians have come and said, hey, would you come help us do this? But meanwhile, on Mandalore, other Mandalorians are like, yeah, we're down with this guy. And they're in power. And so it's kind of like, the Republic is now like backing a civil war.
Oh, basically. Yeah, it's exactly what's happening. I think Obi-Wan specifically says, we don't want to get involved in a civil war.
Right.
In another war, yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, they do, and that's, I guess, partially, because Ahsoka came in and was like, hey, let's come, help me do this. But, at the same time, it's like, yeah, it's like Darth Maul's there, and it you would think that like Kenobi would go, right? But but he doesn't because there's other stuff going on throughout the galaxy, and I mean, to me, I kind of wonder, like, does Sidious know that Darth Maul's there doing this particular plan, and is he like, oh, I've got to step this other stuff into motion before he like pulls these other people off over there, or like to what extent does he actually know what's going on, and to what extent did he kind of like luckbox into not having right, like, I mean, then again, like, honestly, like, if Anakin did show up there, like, I think there's a reasonable chance he would have just like killed Darth Maul and then ended up turning to the dark side eventually anyway. Yeah. So
it is like, I think we've both talked about like enjoying those stories where we're getting to see like what's happening at the same time as another story that we know.
Yeah.
And so like I we both always wonder like where does this fit into the timeline? Mm-hmm. And so that moment when they say, oh, wait a minute, we've got to go to Coruscant, General Grievous is attacking. Yeah. I mean, I got chills. I was like, oh, okay. Now I know exactly what we're doing. This is awesome.
Yeah, now I know where we are. I know all this other stuff that's going on right now and that's connected to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of feeling of like seeing where the pieces fit in the puzzle of story or whatever. I've always found just like a very satisfying feeling. And sort of like a chills kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Like learning that Earth Dawn and Shadowrun were linked.
I never got to have that. But
super obscure awesome. Reference, but
no, yeah. I mean, it's. I was talking with Jeff Randall, who's my host on the set of podcasts where we're talking about The Mandalorian. And I know him because he got started doing a podcast about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he and I have often talked about, and I know him and his podcast partner have often talked about how great it is to have a entire universe of things where, in the Spider-Man movie, they're talking about cleaning up the wreckage after the fight. And, that's that fight we saw in the Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Like, all these kind of things. And so seeing that kind of thing play out makes me so happy. And it's part of, again, why. And I'm now less sure that we're actually getting it, and I might be more confused. But it's why I'm still really holding out hope that we're going to have some connection between what's happening on Mandalore right now and the events on Mandalore that they talk about at the end of the show, The Mandalorian.
Right.
So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, it seems likely because it's like you've got Imperial troops on Mandalore fighting with some Mandalorians against, it seems like, a lot of other Mandalorians. But then they could just as easily turn on the Mandalorians that they're there with, especially since they were led sort of or they were accompanied by a former Jedi. So the whole thing, it's like, how does that, like, what happens on that planet when Order 66 goes into effect? Like, does nothing happen because there's no actual Jedi there?
Well, it's usually, you called it Imperial troops, and right now, they are Republic troops for the next maybe 4 days.
5 minutes, right? Yeah, 4 days. Yeah, exactly. they're going to be Imperial troops real soon. And
exactly.
I think that's actually that's maybe the thing I'd most like to see. How does that happen? You have all these troops that were literally bred for the purpose of creating this war, by one person, but seeing I don't know, the whole story of how the Clone Army comes to be is so weird.
Yeah, it's pretty badly told, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the fact that the Jedi are sort of just like, oh, okay, well, I guess we got this Clone Army from all this, they know that, where it came from, and they're just like, yeah, we'll just keep, nothing to see here, move along, and these are not the Jedi killing clones you're looking for. Wait, why did I Jedi mind trick myself? But
it continues to be one of my only real frustrations with this season is that, as we both talked about, at the end of the last season of Clone Wars, the Jedi figure it out. They know that the clones were entirely created to trap them. And so why they're still using them as though nothing happened is really weird.
Right. It seems like you'd at least want some different procedures in place.
I want to see what happens when a whole bunch of clone troops wearing Ahsoka's face paintings on their own helmets have to try and decide if they kill Ahsoka because now they're killing all the Jedi. Where's
and it's
that?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, and where, are they still them? This whole, microchip in their head. I mean, we saw what happened to, what was his name? Fives was there, but when the chip malfunctioned in season 5, I think, or was it beginning of season 6?
I think it's season 5, but I'm not sure.
Okay. But when that happens, and then, was it Heavy? No, it wasn't Heavy. Anyway, when that happens, it seems like he's not himself, right? And so the question is, are they all going to just suddenly be zombie clones who are no longer themselves, or is it more specific? Is it, I don't know. I'd like to see that play out more in a, in the movie, it's just it happens and then they shoot all these Jedi and then it's we don't really see the fallout from that in terms of the clones, right?
Yeah.
What's it like to be a clone after that happens? Is there this gaslighting about what happened, or are they?
Yeah,
is it
what's
just
the internal talk in the barracks?
Right.
Is it just 100% a brainwash? Is it are they all Manchurian candidates? Is it that? I mean, I don't know if we'll get this, but I part of me would love to see maybe part of why the clones don't really exist by the time it's all regular stormtroopers is there's kind of an internal clone civil war for a little while that we just never hear about because it's in the early years of the Empire, but a whole bunch of clones are what do you mean? They were our generals. They were our commanders. You can't just kill them. What the hell are you doing?
Right.
Like, yeah, there's so many ways that direction can go, fight can go.
Yeah, I'd watch that.
Yeah.
Top. So, it's Clone Trooper top, I think.
Yeah. So now we get to Mandalore, and as you said, there's kind of like it's weird because I don't I mean, crime lord bad, and I remember from but that's kind of what it feels like. It's like in the same way that we're like separatists bad, Republic good, fight separatists. Like I remember there being internal civil wars within Mandalore in the original show, and that there was a pretty clear like good guys and bad guys, but the Republic. But if I recall, it wasn't quite clear enough that the Republic had a reason to intervene.
Right, and they didn't, right? Or they did, but they didn't. Like,
Obi-Wan did.
Oh, right, yeah. Obi-Wan kind of
went off on his own a bit, as well as got I mean, to me, one of my favorite parts of the whole Clone Wars is that Obi-Wan, I think this is part of why he's more forgiving of Anakin and Padme, is because he was romantically tempted by Sabine, I think her name was, and she's the sister of Bo, the person they're working with now.
Right.
Yeah, I never quite got what the reason why we're all fighting there was, except again, crime lord bad. But on some level it didn't matter because it was just so the fight scenes were so good, and I don't remember his name, but like the people who were like leading the Mandalorians on behalf of Darth Maul, I wound up having a lot of sympathy for them because they felt kind of like trapped.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think basically like you had issues on Mandalore before, right? I mean, I kind of wish that I'd rewatched all of the Mandalore episodes before watching these. And I think there's a lot of ways you can watch the Clone Wars where you watch specific episodes that then take you to other episodes and you follow like a thread, I mean, I like the way the series jumps all over the place, but at some points, if you're not watching just the entire series straight through, it can be hard to kind of keep track of, especially, coming back years later.
Right.
Somebody should do like a rewatch and then like a podcast on that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Anyway,
we are doing it on another part of it, but we're in season 2, so it's gonna be a while before we get to the Mandalorian.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I was trying to plug, set you up. I was lobbing a softball, but maybe it just like fell out of my hand.
No, I just took a swing at it. But yeah,
okay, good, cool. But yeah, like it seems like there was. I don't know if it was a civil war exactly, but like the Death Watch or whatever was ousted, right? And then they were a pacifist planet, and I'm also not clear whether Mandalore is a planet or is it a system of planets.
And again, here it's where I feel like I'm reading like chapter 2. I feel like right now I read chapter 2. I'm currently reading chapter 10, but a week ago I read chapter 18. Because
right.
I also know where the Mandalorians wind up in 20 more years. In the TV show The Mandalorian, and so it's just so interesting trying to like connect the dots and be like, where the hell does this all fit?
Yeah. It's, I mean, it's not flawlessly executed for sure. I mean, I loved these episodes. I really loved the Mandalorian show. But there definitely are some things where it's like, wait, this isn't the way. Right? But like why does she keep taking her helmet off? But like maybe that's not the way yet. Maybe there are ways that they're gonna show that how you get from point A to point B, but or point M to point Z or whatever.
Right.
But the thing I do want to acknowledge how enormous of a task it must be to coordinate basically across. I mean, first of all, you've got it's like a story about a galaxy as opposed to like a town or whatever, or a planet even. But it's also, not only is it across so many different time periods that have not gone sequentially, but it's also so many different authors, so many different creators, that in order to try to get everything to really interlock in a satisfying, sensible way, I think is... Like, it's just probably not gonna totally happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, no matter how well you do it.
I mean, we talk about Kevin Feige as being, like, the god of this, and I think he did an amazing job in the MCU.
Yeah.
And yet, I've had numerous episodes with you in the early days of this podcast where we talked about all the ways in which the MCU didn't do it perfectly.
Exactly. Like if that's kind of like the best, and it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of execution of something like that. But also that was more linear over a shorter period of time. Like this is since the 70s.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to link something from the 70s to the 2020s, and it's like
it's almost 50 years of storytelling, and it's over. I mean, from the beginning of Phantom Menace to the end of Rise of Skywalker. I mean, yeah, that's a period of like 6. Well, you think about it, like Luke is probably like 60 years old, and the movies start 20. Yeah, so it's a story over about 100 years, almost 80 years, most.
Because there's a fair amount of time between Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's basically from when Anakin's a kid until Luke's.
Yeah, until his children are quite old.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and Leia.
Right. So yeah, but I will say on the episode of the Clone Wars that we just talked about, that'll be going up pretty soon. Our end of the I'm sorry, I keep getting these words confused.
Mandalorian.
When I was talking with Jeff Randall on the Mandalorian cast, one thing we talked about is that I think one of the biggest problems that the sequel movies had was that it didn't have a Kevin Feige type person helping to tie it all together, and that's why you're kind of having like J.J. Abrams being like, "This is the universe," and Ryan Johnson going, "No, it's this," and then Abrams going, "No, it's this," and
it doesn't. It works with the Alien movies because there's no overarching plot with it. Like I think with the Alien movies, they did a great job of being like, okay, Ridley Scott can direct one, James Cameron can direct another. I think David Fincher can direct, and then that French guy who did Delicatessen, and.
Right.
So,
it worked there, but you need it with something like Star Wars. And now Dave Filoni, is, as Jeff pointed out, is both very involved in both Clone Wars and Mandalorian, which told me something pretty different.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, by the way, did you notice that the opening credits for this were remarkably different?
I did. I did notice that.
Yeah.
The outro music, actually, too. But
I hadn't even caught that. It did make me think, though, that there were that these 4 were like the totally new content.
Yeah.
I think that's because it seems like this is all being added. And like I liked the last 8 episodes, but it just has been all building to this, and it's so good.
This feels like something different than the first 8 episodes, which I really enjoyed a lot. In a very different way. Like this, they felt more specifically about character and sort of local things. And these feel like now we're interacting with kind of the grand, plot. The opera. This is more opera.
Yeah. We spent some time down in the trenches, and I'm glad we did, but now we're back here.
Yeah.
And it's, again, things not being perfect. The timeline is kind of confused because the scene between Anakin and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan makes you think like it's been a long time, months or years. But I think if we go just by the storyline of episode 5 through episode 10, it's been about a week since she left,
right.
But even putting that aside, so what's your take on kind of Ahsoka's overall journey so far in these 2 episodes that we've seen?
In these 2 episodes.
Or like, just in the 6 episodes we've seen.
Yeah, so it seems like, so those first 4 episodes with her, episodes 5 through 8, felt like it was her sort of trying to decide who she wanted to be after leaving the Jedi, thinking that she was going to leave behind, the big war and all of that noise, basically, that seems like it didn't really affect people day to day. And then these 2 episodes feel a little bit like maybe she's realizing so first of all, she gets involved in this specific thing, which seems like, okay, I'll do this thing because, like, I have certain skills and I want to help these people, and it seems like a good thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And whether it involves a Jedi or not, whatever, not a big thing. And, I think then she gets a little bit of an emotional roller coaster, like kind of like, she sees Anakin and Obi-Wan. She's like, okay, hi guys, and then she sees the clones and she's really touched by their gesture. And then Anakin gives her lightsabers. And I think, maybe there's some like, she doesn't really have, like, a foil too much to talk to the same way she does in the other episodes a little bit. But, you know, I'd say maybe there's some doubt about what she wants to do next, like, after this particular mission. But then the mission throws such a wrench, you know, such a curveball that, you know, it's like, she's a little bit like, no, that's not true. That's impossible. You know, like,
yeah, that's a really good way of putting it.
But like, you know, she's gonna find that. I mean, whatever happens is what's gonna happen, and it's like, it's almost like her personal arc is thrown into, like, I don't know. It's one of those things where there's like an emergency, and then it's like whatever personal stuff you have going on, all of a sudden, temporarily, sort of becomes secondary, right? It's like, well, I'm gonna have to back burner the question of, like, what do I want to be doing in the world, and, like, focus directly on, like, what am I going to do about this right now, because it's going on, and it's not like I can come to it or go away from it, like, whenever I want. It's like it's an emerging, you know, an urgent situation.
Like, I thought there was something really powerful about the fact that just for a moment she's, like, maybe kind of agreeing with Maul and maybe saying, like, okay, we can work together. You know,
I think she was actually just, like, trying to pump him for information, but
okay, that's entirely possible.
I kind of thought that at first too. Then I'm like, oh, actually, I think she's just like, hey, tell me about Skywalker, and maybe I'll, you know,
certainly. Well, and I think that gets us to so most of the time I have not liked the fact that Maul is still hanging around. Like, to me, especially because I thought Darth Maul was frankly one of the best parts of The Phantom Menace. Yes. In part because he almost never spoke. He was so imposing. He was just this, like, force of nature. And I like the idea of there being a Jedi who was cast aside, who's all like, you know, I'm doing this gesture, you can't see it, but, you know, like, kind of, I'm like, you know, putting my fingertips against each other and, like, I'm dark in contemplation. What shall I do with you? Right. That doesn't feel like Darth Maul at all to me. And I never liked it here. I didn't like him appearing at the end of Solo, which, you know, otherwise that was a fine movie. I have no other complaints about that.
Right, Top 15 in the 10 movies.
Watching George Lucas, watch paint dry. But here it worked so well because, again, I don't love this as Darth Maul from Phantom Menace, but I love the idea of the, you know, part of the rule of Sith means you're constantly throwing someone aside.
Right.
And I love the idea of him sort of, like, he doesn't care about the universe. He doesn't have morality, but he just feels so betrayed and so played off that he wants to stop this plan. And also he has an insight into Darth Sidious that no other character we've ever talked to has.
Yeah. Yeah, this felt like the first time that Darth Maul being around felt really consequential.
Yeah.
And I agree that him talking is, like, less cool than him not talking. Just like, you know, a Mandalorian with their helmet on is cooler than a Mandalorian without their helmet on. But, like, I agree with you in terms of him showing up in other spots. Like, I feel like earlier in the series, they brought him back partially, like, as an excuse to, like, have more lightsaber battles with, like, blue lightsabers against red lightsabers.
I think that's true.
Right? But yeah, like, the way the Sith work, you know, it's like, you've got Sidious, and he's got Maul, and then Maul is apparently killed, and then he's like, okay, you're next.
Right.
And you've got Dooku, and then Dooku's like, hey, Ventress, I'm going to train you. And Sidious is like, whoa. You don't get to have one.
Yeah.
Like, either she can kill you, or you can kill her, or I can kill you, or I can kill her. Those are the only options, because nobody's killing me.
Right.
Like, let's face it, you know?
Yeah, not okay.
Right. And then, you know, and then Anakin ends up killing Dooku, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, like, a major step towards him becoming the Sith apprentice.
Which, going back again, Obi-Wan, like, he never says any of that, but, like, you can just see, like, the fear and regret in his face when he says, like, Anakin killed Dooku. Because I think that's when he's starting to put it together, but he's not even willing to admit it to himself.
Right. He has, like, a feeling.
Yeah.
It's like an unsettled, yeah.
But yeah, it's such an interesting journey. And we talked before, or I certainly talked before, about how I really wanted, when we got Ahsoka back, I wanted, the Ahsoka Ventress buddy cop show.
Right.
Or not cop, but, like the two vigilantes on the run.
Yeah.
And we're not getting that. I think that's pretty clear. And it's not quite the same, but I like that Maul is a little bit playing that similar role for Ahsoka, in that he's kind of like, as much as she's recognizing that she doesn't want to go to the dark side with Maul, I do feel like his comment about how, like, you were thrown aside by the Jedi just as much as I was thrown aside by the Sith, and we are both kind of lost, I think that does hit her. And I feel like that, we have to see what happens in the next 2 episodes, but to me, that moment is a big part of her, like, closing that door that, like I was saying, like, you went back to the X and you're sort of like, oh yeah, but like they were so good to me in some ways. And now Darth is helping her be like, yeah, no, that's not, I don't want to be a Jedi again.
Yeah, for sure. It basically just makes her confront everything, and it frames things in a certain way. And I don't know, I feel like this episode raised those questions, and she made some decisions, right? Like, right. Well, I'm not going to work with you, right?
Yeah.
Like, but at the same time, like, I feel like those questions can only be answered as things progress further.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's I think that was needed because, I mean, like all prequels, the problem with that fight was, I know that both those characters live. I know that Darth Maul shows up 20 years later in Solo, and I know that Ahsoka shows up, in further seasons. And so I felt like, and on the one hand, that always just kind of sucks, and I wish that hadn't been the case. But I felt like by making it much more about where is Ahsoka going to go and where's Maul going to go, they added that tension to the fight. Because frankly, like, if you told me that such a good a fight that would become one of my favorite lightsaber battles of all of Star Wars is one where I am 100% positive that both of them live, I'd look at you like you're crazy. Right. And yet, I watched that fight 5 times last night. Like,
well, so this is actually one of my biggest peeves with, like, media in general, and by which I mean, like, TV, film, that there's this, and this is especially true with blockbuster stuff, but like these types of shows as well, that there's this obsession with stakes and this idea that, like, mortality almost, like, has to be, like, the ultimate stake. And that if you have a fight like this where the audience, probably not all the audience, right? Not everybody follows all the news. Not everybody's seen Solo.
Right.
Although it is such a wonderful film.
Delete.
That if, that if the audience knows that both characters will survive a fight, then they won't have any emotional investment in it, right? And it won't really play. And I've just always felt like that's kind of false. And I think this is just a brilliant way of demonstrating that it's like, yeah, those are stakes that you can have, right? The world hanging in the balance is another one, right? Like, does every major movie have to be about the world coming to an end, potentially? And our heroes saving the world? Like, sometimes it can be about saving one person, or sometimes it can even just be about, saving some idea they have about who they are, or overcoming that idea they have about who they are and becoming who they will be.
We've said it's why we like the Ant-Man movies so much, is that their stakes are so much smaller than anything happening in the MCU.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of like, well, if this technology really gets into the wrong hands, it'll be horrible and a lot of bad stuff will happen. But there's no like, here's the clock. If it gets to 0 before we do this other thing, everyone's going to die.
Yeah.
And so I think this fight did a brilliant job of setting up stakes that were not the life or death stakes of the characters involved.
Right. Especially because like, there is nothing that's going to happen in this fight that will change whether or not Darth Sidious causes Anakin to switch. Like, all the stuff about, like, Ahsoka trying to learn whether or not, like, we know that's not going to happen. And so it's just about really, like, what happens to Darth Maul and what happens to Ahsoka. And, the fact that they did it in a way that made me sympathetic to Maul was just like, this is really good storytelling. Because like that scene where he's like, just let me die, or whatever it was he says, I felt for him, you know? And I was like, Jesus.
Right. Yeah, he's like, I don't want to get captured by these Jedi and then be like, I mean, it's like, where's that going to go? You know? Like, if he gets captured by the Republic and then the Republic becomes the Empire, and then now, like, you know, I mean, he was basically trying to stop his old boss from becoming the new big boss, which he's going to. And yeah, so I guess he didn't foresee this outcome, but if he did, it like didn't look good to him.
Yeah. And it does make me so interesting about Ahsoka. And it's, I don't know if we ever have a story where we get this, because it's kind of like, I know that we do get Ahsoka in Star Wars Rebels, which as I understand it comes pretty soon after this. And that's that, as I've been told, that's even more of a kid's show than the Clone Wars, so we don't find out.
It felt that way to me. I mean, I only watched the first.
Well, because there's a scene that I want to see, and maybe we'll get it, like, she will tell it in The Mandalorian as a flashback.
Yeah.
But I want to see the moment where Ahsoka is seeing, maybe just like on news vids or whatever, or maybe in person, but like is recognizing that Darth Vader exists and Darth Vader is doing these horrible things. And she has to realize it's Anakin.
Yeah.
I want to see that happen. And maybe we'll even see it now. I mean, you know, it's entirely possible this series, the last 2 episodes happen chronologically, like at the time when he's already killed all the younglings, and she gets to know about that.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know if that'll happen here or somewhere else. But I feel like I'd never really even given. Yeah, I never even given much thought before. But like the scene where like Obi-Wan and especially Maul is telling her what's going to happen to Anakin, and she just doesn't want to believe it. Like that. Yeah. Oh, so good.
Yeah, I feel like we're seeing the front half of that, you know?
Yeah.
And I would like to see the back end of it, where it's like, yeah, now Anakin is Vader, and it's like, you know, she has to deal with that emotionally.
Yeah.
And probably not in person, because, you know, she doesn't want to get killed like all the other Jedi, right? You know, there are questions. The thing is, when you have characters like this going around, it's like, you know, where was she during the rebellion? Like, like what happened? You know, like, and you know, and then how old is she in the Mandalorian's right after Jedi, right? Or like a few years after Jedi, Return of the Jedi,
right? So I think that's about like 25, 30 years. So yeah, by that point she'll probably be like
years,
in her 40s or so.
Right. Yeah, which makes sense. I mean,
and again,
casting-wise.
I forget what race what species she is. I know she's not Twi'lek, but she's something else that has like the ear horn things like Twi'leks do. But I don't, you know, we don't know how much they age. You know, it's 40 years for her. That might be she's just about to die. It might be she's in her adolescence. You know, we have no idea.
Right. Like the child is 50.
Right.
At that point, right? So, like, they're similar age, actually. She's a little bit younger.
Yeah.
Maybe, we think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Do they ever actually say her age, like, as a number?
Looking it up, all of the dating is done by the Battle of Yavin as kind of like the AD BC moment. So she was born 36 years before the Battle of Yavin, and the Clone Wars starts 22 years before the Battle of Yavin and goes to 19 years before the Battle of Yavin. So she is 14 when the Clone Wars start, and she is 17 now when the Clone Wars are ending.
That feels about right.
Yeah, which does make sense. And it's, you know, I feel like throughout the Clone Wars, like there are times when they play her more like she's 10 or 12, and then right now there are times when they play her more like she's 20 or 22. But frankly, like I have met 14-year-olds who act like they're 10, and I've met 17-year-olds who act like they're 25. So, like, that does make sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like 3 years being a general in a galactic war, you know, that ages a person a bit.
Yeah, right. And, like, sometimes it's the same person who seems way younger than their age and then way older than their age.
Exactly, yeah. Depending on different circumstances. Cool. Well, so any other kind of big things from this we wanted to talk about? I feel like there's so much we haven't even scratched the surface on, but also I want to make this not go too long.
Right. Yeah, I want to go watch the last 2 episodes, so let's wrap this up. No. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely like to see the, you know, my name's Ahsoka Tano. I used to be a Jedi.
Oh my God, yes.
and then Ventress being like, shall we shoot them?
Oh, yeah.
But
For anyone who doesn't understand it, this is a reference to Burn Notice, which is, I still think it's one of my favorite shows. I know you hold it in very, very high regard as well. We actually have done an episode on it that will come out on Superhero Ethics Podcast in a couple of weeks. That would be so good, actually. It's such a great parallel. I love that.
But I do think that in the context of this episode and wrapping up this season of the Clone Wars, I think pairing Ahsoka with Maul was actually a better choice.
Yeah.
Just because Maul was Sidious's apprentice and she was, Anakin's Padawan.
Yeah.
And so that there's this parallel there that plays better, I think.
I really think so. And it also opens up just so many story possibilities. I mean, one of the things, and here again, like, this is 100% just headcanon. I don't know if we're ever going to get in the stories. So, one of the things that's established is in the rule of two, if you are the apprentice, you're supposed to always be looking for your own apprentice so that you can be ready to take over from the master.
Right.
And Sidious recruits Darth Maul while Sidious is still only the apprentice. And Plagueis, in at least in the books, encourages him to do that because you're supposed to be doing it in the same way that Sidious encourages Dooku to recruit Ventress. But there's also don't get too good with that.
Right. It's like once they get too strong, it's like either they're supposed to kill you or you're supposed to kill them.
Right. And by that same rule of two, that's why at first the Emperor wants Vader to recruit Skywalker. Or no, he wants him to kill Skywalker, and then Vader wants to recruit Skywalker. Right. Wouldn't it have made sense?
He's like, no, we can turn him.
If 10 years ago, before he has any idea that Luke Skywalker exists, if Darth Vader was thinking about who to recruit as his... Wouldn't he try to find Ahsoka Tano again?
Yes. That would be it. I would watch that story.
If you just had, the burn notice of Ahsoka and Ventress having their adventures, but every now and then Darth Vader is trying to find, on her trail.
Right.
The other
I love it.
The other thing I was thinking that I would love to see, and again, this wouldn't be a series, this would just be a scene. And given everything that's happened, I don't think you can retcon it in now because I don't think it would make any sense. But I would love to see Ahsoka Tano sit down with Luke Skywalker to tell him about her father. Just sit down really with Luke and Leia,
Yeah, about his father.
Yeah. And Leia. In Return of the Jedi, that could have helped make so much sense, or even just in the intervening periods. Because now, doesn't it, why wouldn't they have ever met up?
Right. I mean, I guess we don't know what happens in The Mandalorian. We don't know whether Ahsoka's around in the post Empire years, right? It's didn't that happen? There's so much about the whole whatever happens between Return of the Jedi and A Force Awakens.
Yeah.
That I feel like you need a show like the Clone Wars to make that make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll make one. You know what? They'll probably make one.
I mean, are you talking about the time between the end of movie 3 and the beginning of movie 4, or the end of movie 6 and the beginning of movie 7?
6 and 7.
Okay,
because this is between 2 and 3, I guess.
Right.
The other thing too.
I am frankly hoping that that's what the Mandalorian turns into.
Right. That is what it is to begin with, right? That's where it's set. But it's how broad will it go? Right.
And because right now, and I've said this a couple times on that part of the podcast, it's I like this, we talked with this show. I like that it's right now small stakes and small, but I would really love it if we start to hear the rumblings that become the First Order in that show. I think that would be so good. More than anything, it just reminds me of why I just hate the whole concept of prequels. And I get that 50 years ago, no one ever thought you could have any such thing as an extended universe. So I understand why the storytelling was done this way. But it now gives me such an appreciation for, imagine if George Lucas had sat down and said, I know that I'm going to be able to make every movie and every TV show I want to. And so I'm already thinking about Ahsoka Tano as I'm writing Return of the Jedi, and I'm, because the problem I always have with any prequel is you invent a really great character who was never mentioned in the later movies or TV shows, and it's wonderful, but then you're left with, well, why weren't they ever mentioned,
Right. I feel like I'm on the verge of going on a diatribe about George R.R. Martin, but I'll try not to.
But a positive or negative?
Neither. Just sort of observational. Yeah. Kind of, there's someone who had an idea of a story he wanted to tell, and he started telling it, and it kept growing, right?
Yeah.
And he's got this idea that it's a story that he wants to tell in X number of novels, right?
Right.
And I think originally was it 5, and then now it's going to be 7. Like basically he had to change this and that because it just kept growing. And I think the structure of the novel has probably really sort of pinned him in, and that's probably part of why it's taken him, a light year to write. I mean, it's that's why it takes so long between one and another, right?
Yeah.
I think a light year is a measure of distance, so that didn't make any sense. But
it's like a parsec.
Whatever. This isn't science fiction; it's space opera.
Exactly.
We're gonna be loose with our metaphors. But meanwhile, George Lucas, I think early on, had an idea of how he wanted to tell a story, and he wanted to do a 3-movie trilogy, and he managed to do that. And then he wanted to have a 3-movie prequel and a 3-movie postquel. Right?
Yeah.
Which I know is just a sequel, but sequel trilogy. And I think he wasn't thinking about all the possibilities of a multimedia universe, right? Which is what Star Wars became even before the prequel trilogy came out, right? There was tons of stuff that was generally regarded as canon at the time, like at least until later. And I think the idea that you can create a universe through many different forms of media and have them all connected, and that not everyone has to be not every entry into a world has to be the main thing.
Yeah. Right?
Like you can do a book of short stories, and I think actually maybe George R. R. Martin did that, right? But like that you can, be like, yeah, we'll split this off this way, this off this way. We'll tell this story over here, this story over here, and we'll just keep communicating in order to, or if it's one creator, to make sure that everything lines up. And the larger it grows, the harder that process is going to be. But I think the more that's conceived of early on, and I think that's happening a little bit more than it used to. But I think often it's more like, oh, well, they start making graphic novels about Buffy or Avatar: The Last Airbender because, this series was done, right? Yeah. Either it got canceled or they're like, well, we told our main story and now we're going to tell some other side stories in this other medium. And I think the more that people embrace that as a way of making a really broad universe, really creating a world and letting people get deep into it and kind of answering all the different little questions, I think the more satisfying these universes will be.
Yeah. And I will give a plug for Babylon 5 is the TV show that I know of that has done that the best. And it happened because the author sat down before a single, moment was put on film and wrote out the plot of the entire 5-season arc he wanted to tell, including all of the minor characters and all of where they would go. And, wow. And he actually did it to an extent where he had a way where, he had what he called a backup plan for everything, so that when a particular actor or actress didn't want to be on the show, he had a way to write them out and a way to write someone else in to do what they were supposed to do. And
wow,
it's amazing because he's one of the best world builders I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
the dialogue is crap.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I feel like that's sort of Lucas too, right?
Yeah, it's very much Lucas.
Yeah,
he's amazing at world building. He needs someone else to help tell his story. And
yeah,
part of the problem with Babylon 5 is they thought it was going to get canceled after 4 seasons. So a whole bunch, but even then he was able to tell his whole story in 4 seasons and then have a whole bunch of stuff left on the table to tell in season 5 when they got to season 5 again. And it's choppy because of that, but he really tried something truly incredible, and I feel like we're getting more of that in ways I really appreciate. Because to me, I've always thought you could have the perfect science fiction show if you combined Babylon 5 and Battlestar Galactica. Because Babylon 5 is cheesy dialogue and bad directing. Some of it's very, very good, but especially early on. but entirely plotted out. When in Battlestar Galactica, they start the show asking a question, and the writers have admitted they had no idea what the answer was, which to me is just so bad.
It's not usually a good way to go.
Yeah. So
I mean, one thing though is that like once you start having characters played by actors, right? Once you start actually writing out all of the dialogue and all of the interpersonal scenes, I think, that might be one reason that the dialogue was so whatever it was.
Yeah.
I haven't really watched it, but that, if you're writing dialogue to, basically to service the plot, to service your story, I think it's harder, right? To make it natural. And so sometimes, like, your characters don't want to do what you thought they wanted to do. Like, they change their minds. And, like, now it's like you have to deal with that.
Or sometimes two actors have an incredible chemistry that you never thought of. And now you're like, what if we actually have these characters go in this whole other direction because of that, Yeah.
I mean, it's like the Arrow show. Like, the Felicity character showed up. And, like, that was supposed to be a minor character. And they're like, wait, we need more of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's change the show.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is there has to be that kind of a balance. And it does make me feel like animation makes that much easier. Because, like...
Absolutely.
I'm sure people who are very dedicated, voice people can hear the difference better than I can. But a lot of these characters have been voiced by numerous people over the years of the Clone Wars, Yeah. I mean, even like... this is not a spoiler because it's a spoiler about an actor, but it's a sad moment. The TV show Avatar: The Last Airbender, which you helped turn me on to, is an amazing bit of animation and storytelling. I mean, I think one of the absolute best. And I think widely understood as like the character who everybody wants to have as their like mentor figure, Uncle Iroh.
Right.
An amazing character played by two different actors over the course of the show because one of them passed away. And I remember someone told me that, and it was like, oh, okay, so this character's not going to be anywhere near as effective because it's going to change. And then I watched it, and I literally forgot that happened because it sounds different, but it's the same character.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I'd say that I feel the difference, but the first time I saw the series, I didn't know that, and I don't think I noticed the first time I saw the series. And it's... Like, in live action, I mean, Dumbledore, right, in the Harry Potter movies, the actor died, and they replaced him. And I guess when you have so much beard and hair and hat and robe, it's like, I mean, I think there's something about, like, a performer's physical appearance in a movie or a TV show that makes it a little harder to kind of accept changes. Although, like, they did it in the MCU twice, right?
Yeah.
So, like...
Brody.
Yeah, and Hulk.
Oh, yeah.
But, like...
Most people barely consider the...
In animation, it's smoother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know people barely consider the Incredible Hulk part of the MCU, even though it is part of the MCU, and the origin of the...
and it's too bad, because I definitely... I like that movie a lot more than others. But... Anyway, we're now far into Tangent World.
Yeah.
And you're right, I want to go watch the last 2 episodes. So
let's do it.
Yeah, all right. This has been great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul. Fans, what do you guys think? What are your... Especially, we'll probably have an extra day before the next episode comes out. I'm editing these as fast as I can. My schedule's all over the place, and I apologize for that. I've had, among other things, my fiance has had surgery, so there's been a lot of caretaking of her. And I will play that card as much as I can to justify the weird schedule we've got. But let us know. We've only got 2 episodes left. We're wrapping all this up. I'd love to hear your theories. We'll read them at the beginning of the show. Get some thoughts out there. Let us know what you think. So you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on email. All that information is in the show notes. Click any of those links. You'll reach us. Let us know what you think. If you've seen those last 2 episodes already, please don't post that on any of those public things. You can email us on the email link and just put in spoilers for episodes 11 or episodes 12, and I will not read those until after I've seen them, but then I will read them, and we'll read them as part of the discussion we're having today. So thank you so much. We'd love to have you participate. Paul, this has been great. Let's go watch those last episodes. Have a good day.